Today, on another episode of the Danville Discussion.
Here, immortalized in bronze, is the Black Knight himself and his Hounds of Heck on their final charge to vanquish the dragon. And here is the disastrous results. Legend says that the Black Knight's ghost still haunts these foggy moors, riding in search of the dragon, followed by his pack of fierce hounds.
Hey, I know what we should do today. Grandpa Fletcher, let's have a medieval tournament, just like the knights did in the days of yore. We can have jousting and catapults and not bathe.
Way ahead of you on the not bathing.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Danville Discussion, a podcast about all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. I'm your host Caleb Dirksen, and some of you may know me from my self-titled YouTube channel, the one and only place for some web series related to animation such as Caleb Reviews. If this is your first time with us, well, let me just give you some context on what this podcast is all about. It is a podcast where I talk about shows set in the Dan Povenmire and or Jeff Swampy Marsh universe, or Dwampyverse for short. That's why it's called the Danville Discussion. But specifically, this podcast currently covers each episode of either Phineas and Ferb or Hamster and Gretel, and I go into the world of both of these shows searching for cultural or in-universe references, fun facts, and anything like that, and then finally we will end things off by giving every episode a roller coaster rating. So, on today's episode, I am going to look at episode 10 of Phineas and Ferb, which contains the following two segments, A Hard Day's Night and Brobot. If you want to check out more episodes of the Danville Discussion, then head on to anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen and it'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion website on Spotify for creators. Before we get things started though, I have some new and recent unread listener feedback.
Oh, we can't get to our song till we deal with our fan mail. Think you could help?
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh!
Great, you can start with this bag.
I got some new comments from Spotify since the last episode. Our first one is from Lucky Cervantes, who commented on episode 19A where I talked about 5 Dwampyverse-related Chibi Tiny Tales shorts, and she says, please talk more about Milo Murphy's Law with a praying hands emoji. Thanks for that comment, and don't worry, I will be covering Milo Murphy's Law in the future. I just currently have the original run of Phineas and Ferb and Hamster and Gretel to finish off, and that's when I plan to review Milo Murphy's Law alongside the Phineas and Ferb revival run. I mean, I get that there are people requesting me to talk about Milo, but if you really want me to do it early, I may as well start off with the Halloween or Christmas specials when those times come. But I appreciate that comment and I will get it to it eventually, so don't you worry too much. I also love the Diogi icon. Justice Sponge also has something to say on Spotify regarding episode 6A on the Hamster and Gretel theme song takeover and the first 3 Chibi Tiny Tales shorts of the show, and it says, is that... And then it just ends there. I don't really know what you're talking about, but thanks for the interesting comment anyways. Next is a comment from Kel and Cedro on Spotify from the same episode, in which they just recite the theme song Takeover saying, if the person you're looking for isn't necessarily someone with superpowers but someone whose sister has superpowers, then he's your man. Thanks for that comment though, and I love how you recited it. Thanks again to those people who left those comments on Spotify. I haven't gotten new fan mail over Gmail, but still, you guys are great. Alright, now let's get into our discussion of the episode, but before we do, let's go over the air dates of these segments. So, A Hard Day's Night made its world premiere on Disney Channel in Latin America and Brazil on February 21st, 2008, before airing in the US on June 14th that year, being the 31st episode in broadcast order for the latter market, while Brobot first premiered on Disney Channel in the US on February 6th, 2008, as the 8th episode in broadcast order. Now, our first segment, I'm going to be analyzing A Hard Day's Night. And A Hard Day's Night was a story by Bobby Gaylor and Martin Olson. It was storyboarded by John Colton Berry and Mike Roth, and it was directed by Dan Povenmire. The episode finds the Flynn Fletcher family on a trip to England, which of course happens to be the home country of the Fletchers, Ferb's side of the family, as they tour around some landmarks and then drive up to the Fletcher cottage for their yearly visitation to Lawrence's parents, Reginald and Winifred. Along the way, Phineas says that either he has grown a lot or England has gotten smaller. Right next door to the Fletcher cottage, there is a large castle structure belonging to the neighbors, but Grandpa Reg notes that it used to belong to the Black Knight, and the boys inquire and hear about the famous Black Knight of Worcestershire who went to chase a dragon with disastrous results, and was said to still be in search of the dragon until this day. And that's when Phineas is instantly inspired to the point that he and Ferb decide to host a medieval-style tournament complete with jousting, armor, catapults, and suckling pigs. Having been left with her British grandparents, Candace is thoroughly bored until she notices Charles Pippin IV, the handsome son of the rich Pippin family next door, who mostly looks a lot like Jeremy back in America. Charles decides to take part in the joust, and so Candace, who is still too taken by Charles, agrees to take part too, allowing herself to get locked in a tower as a damsel in distress and the fair princess, waiting to get rescued by Charles. Meanwhile, the OWCA has kidnapped Dr. Lloyd Wexler, an evil scientist, so that Perry could dress as the scientist, infiltrate EvilCon, and find out what Dr. Doofenshmirtz is up to. While there, Doofenshmirtz sees Perry in disguise, but thinks he is Dr. Wexler and leads him around the convention. Back at the Pippin Castle, Candace, in the role of the fair princess in the tower, tries to talk to Charles from the top of the tower, but realizes that he can't hear her. While trying to leave the tower, Candace breaks off the door handle. She screams for help, but everybody thinks she is rehearsing for the tournament. She breaks down the door using a spear attached to the Black Knight armor, but ends up in the Black Knight armor after falling down a flight of stairs. While putting on armor for the joust, Charles remarks that Phineas and Ferb can fit into one armor, and so Ferb takes the bottom half of an armor while Phineas takes the top half. Charles walks away to get his own armor. Candace, trapped in the Black Knight armor, cannot speak and has trouble moving. She stumbles to Phineas and Ferb just as Charles leaves, and Phineas and Ferb believe she is Charles and try to joust against her. Having no control, Candace is flung from the horse straight into the tower window, then falls down the staircase only to wind up on the horse again. After this gets repeated a second time, the horse rides off through the town. Then Charles shows up and Phineas wonders who they just jousted. Grandpa Fletcher says that could have been the ghost of the Black Knight. Candace, out of control, gets splashed by gravy through an overturned tanker, then gets chased by a pack of stray dogs, who were really after the smell of the gravy. Meanwhile, Doofenshmirtz insists that Dr. Wexler read from his book, but since Perry can't talk, he hesitates. After a moment, Perry decides to pretend to read while playing the book on CD. The CD keeps skipping like a broken record though, and Doof gets suspicious. This causes Perry to remove his disguise, and the two rush into giant robots nearby. Originally, Perry took the giant dragon robot while Doof was in the giant Queen Elizabeth I robot. Doof asks for a switch, but regrets when Perry easily manages several smashes on the dragon robot. As they crash EvilCon, Doof tries to burn the Queen Elizabeth robot, but only manages to burn himself, commenting that it was a stupid design. Back at the field, Phineas and Ferb try to joust against Charles, but accidentally put the armor on sideways. The three of them crash seconds after the joust begins, and Grandpa Fletcher declares it a draw. Candace starts to ride back towards the fest. In the air, after being hit by multiple arms from the Queen Elizabeth robot, Dr. D starts randomly hitting buttons, defeats and ejects himself, while the robot crashes in the jousting lane. The robot explodes due to Doof accidentally hitting the self-destruct button before he ejected himself, knocking Candace free of her armor and landing in Charles' arms. Linda and Lawrence then return home with an antique barometer and ask what they missed. Ferb replies, saying he heard there's a new version of Jane Eyre in the offing, and then Perry returns, leaving the Queen Elizabeth robot flying in the background, and that is the end of A Hard Day's Night.
Hello! We had the most amazing time. Look, I found this 19th century barometer. Anything interesting happen around here?
I hear there's a new version of Jane Eyre in the offing.
Now let's go over the cultural references for this one. The title is a play of the popular Beatles song A Hard Day's Night, which is the theme song of their 1964 feature film of the same name.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog.
This is a play on words, obviously because of its English setting and medieval elements, as there are knights in this one. Now, who doesn't know the Beatles? They were one of the most popular rock bands of the 1960s, and one of the music bands that helped popularize British rock music in Western society, with hits like Love Me Do, Help, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and their cover of Twist and Shout. And the members' names would even become some of the most recognizable names in the industry, like John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. In animation, they also had a film called Yellow Submarine, based on their song of the same name from their 1966 album Revolver. Next, the moment when the hounds follow the Black Knight is similar to that moment in the Sherlock Holmes book, The Hound of the Baskervilles, when the enormous dog follows Sir Hugo Baskerville. Evil Con, of course, is a parody of a comic book convention, or Comic-Con for short, and the dragon that the Black Knight fights in the song has a similar look to Maleficent's dragon form in Walt Disney's 1959 animated film of Sleeping Beauty. One of the most iconic Disney animated films of the Walt era, and having seen it myself and considering it a classic, that climax with Dragon Maleficent and Prince Philip fighting her off with help from the good fairies, how can I not remember that scene? Especially with Maleficent's dialogue as she prepares to turn into a dragon, which also marks the first time in a Disney animated film where they actually got away with dropping the word hell.
Now shall you deal with me, O Prince, and all the powers of hell!
And lastly, the VBBC channel name is an obvious parody of the BBC, a major TV and radio organization in the UK that also has some TV channels in some parts of the world. But whereas the real BBC acronym stands for British Broadcasting Corporation, VBBC may be the abbreviation of the Very British Broadcasting Corporation. And for some handy tools out of my big toolbox of Hard Day's Night supplies, there's another song in the episode called Sir Phineas and Ferb, which actually has lyrics, but for this episode, it can only be heard in instrumental form throughout. The instrumental version can also be heard in What Do It Do from Season 2 during Lawrence's lecture on the Earl of Worcestershire, a bit in The Doof Side of the Moon from the same season when Albert tells Candace about his medieval knight's code, and during the epilogue of Excalibur from Season 3, as well as the Milo Murphy's Law episode The Llama Incident from Season 1 when Milo and Melissa are watching the stage production of Llamalet, which is just Hamlet but with llamas. But it wasn't until years later when the YouTube channel of Charter Schoolgirl, who is known to upload high-quality, clean, and in some cases lost versions of Phineas and Ferb and Milo Murphy's Law songs that were never officially released on a soundtrack album, including their demo versions, managed to upload the full version of the Sir Phineas and Ferb song with the actual lyrics performed by Danny Jacob himself. In fact, why don't we take a listen to it and hear the whole thing?
Here's Here's a tale of Sir Phineas and Ferb, the knight who had two names. Not afraid of anything, not even dragon flames. Good Ferb, he mans the legs of it, and Phineas works the torso. As separate folk they can do quite a lot, but together even more so. Sir Phineas and Ferb, Sir Phineas and Ferb, they can parry and thrust and some other verbs. Sir Phineas and Ferb, Sir Phineas and Ferb. When you put them together, they're a knight superb. When you put them together, they're a knight superb.
Pretty good, I gotta say. I really like the way they rhyme the last words of each lyric, and some of them are pretty funny, like the knight who had two names. The joke being that the boys control an entire suit of armor with Ferb operating the legs and Phineas operating the arms, head, and torso. So that's the song of Sir Phineas and Ferb. Next in the handy tools, this episode is part of a story arc that gets continued in the Season 2 episode Elementary, My Dear Stacy, in which Stacy Hirano joins in, also on a trip to England at the same time as the Flynn Fletchers, and Candace and Stacy pull a Phineas and Ferb bust of their own as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson respectively. Linda doesn't speak at all in this episode, even though she makes an appearance with the rest of the family. The taxi Linda and Lawrence take is an LTITX1. Perry's fake ID of Dr. Wexler says, "Note, not a platypus." One of the Hounds of Heck closely resembles the Johnson family poodle, who had previously appeared in the episode before this, One Good Scare Ought to Do It, and Stubbings, the butler who serves the Pippin family, is voiced by English actor Tim Curry, who has been acting in movies and TV shows for several decades, including playing Dr. Frankenfurter in both the original Rocky Horror Stage Show and the Rocky Horror Picture Show, the concierge in Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, Long John Silver in Muppet Treasure Island, Drake in The Pebble and the Penguin, Forte in Beauty and the Beast The Enchanted Christmas, and Nigel Thornberry in The Wild Thornberries. This is one of the few episodes where none of Phineas and Ferb's friends are featured, as characters like Isabella, Buford, and Baljeet, etc. are not there. This is also the first episode to not take place in Danville, as well as featuring the first appearance of Lawrence's parents. It's also the first episode in which Candace speaks in an attempted British accent, as she does so while playing her role as the fair princess in the tower to Charles.
As the fair princess in the tower, I declare Sir Charles the winner of the tournament. Wait a second. Could this be one of those things that backfires horribly on me? Nah.
This would later be continued in episodes like Season 3's My Fair Goalie, while she and Jeremy are meeting for high tea and she's wearing a pink British-style ladylike outfit based on Eliza Doolittle's lady clothes in My Fair Lady, after becoming a proper lady with help from Eliza Fletcher, one of Ferb's cousins.
Candace? I can't help but notice your accent there.
Why, yes, do you like it? I thought an Anglophile such as yourself might appreciate the soothing lilt of the Queen's English.
An Anglophile such as myself? Oh, ha! I get it. Well, yes. I could listen to you speak like that all day.
And it also happens in Season 4's Phineas and Ferb Save Summer, when Candace is riding on a unicorn named Rainbow, which is actually just a donkey with a horn tied onto its head.
No, I refuse! Quickly, Rainbow, we must away! Fly now, fly! On, proud beauty, fly! Fly!
And lastly, this is the only time Candace shows having romantic interest in a boy that isn't Jeremy, though Charles has an incredibly similar appearance to Jeremy. Alright, now it's time to get into my thoughts about the episode. So this episode has plenty of great moments and a good homage to the medieval period and British culture. A lot of the humor is great, such as at the beginning where, as they're driving around the British landmarks, Phineas says, either I've grown a lot in the last year, or England's gotten smaller. And they literally show the landmarks all grouped together in one shot as the taxi drives off. Next, there was also when Grandpa Red shows the boys a statue of the Black Knight with his Hounds of Heck on their final charge against the dragon, and then he shows a statue of the disastrous result, in which the knight ultimately gets roasted on a big skewer by the dragon. One of my highlights is the running gag that happens in the episode, in which Candace gets flung up through the window into the top of the tower and sent tumbling down the stairs until she bounces off the floor and lands on something. During the joust, Candace in the Black Knight armor gets flung off her horse twice onto a catapult, which then throws her into the top of the tower all the way down until she lands back on the horse's saddle. And it happens once more when the Black Knight Candace approaches Doof's robot dragon as it self-destructs, blasting Candace out of the armor, and after tumbling down the stairs of the tower, she lands back into Charles' hands. Another one among those is when the horse is taking the Black Knight Candace down the streets of London, and it causes an animal control truck and a gravy truck to collide, which leads the gravy to splash onto her, and a pack of stray dogs from the animal control truck become attracted to the smell of the gravy on her, and they run after her, which causes the people in the downtown area to think that it's the ghost of the Black Knight and his Hounds of Heck. And going into the Perry and Doof aspect, that's probably the most memorable part of the episode, as it has some of its most iconic moments. Starting with the Perry lair entrance gag, it is pretty creative as it shows him riding the top deck of a British double-decker bus, and then he stops to enter the inside of a lamppost, flying out of the bus with his jetpack, and tries to get down to his lair from inside despite being a bit stuck. And when he does make it down, Monogram says, "Sorry about the tight squeeze, but they're on the metric system," which is a pretty solid joke because the US typically uses the imperial system, but other places like the UK commonly use the metric system. For example, the width of the tube inside the lamppost is presumably about 10 centimeters in metric. When we're at EvilCon, it initially looks like Doof recognizes Perry in disguise as Dr. Wexler, but then thinks it is Dr. Wexler until later on when Perry removes his disguise, when Doof says, "I want to say that I knew it was you all along, but I can't because I didn't." It's also funny because the point of Doof's suspicions is that he just about never recognizes Perry in his disguises, and also doesn't recognize him outside of his brown fedora, which is why we have the occasional running gag of, "A platypus? Perry the platypus!" And speaking of which, we have that again in this episode, where after Perry pretends to speak with help from an audio CD containing the real Wexler's audiobook, which ends up skipping on the spec several times to the point that he slams the boombox behind him to shut it off, Doof says he doesn't remember him saying spec so many times, and that leads to Perry removing his Dr. Wexler disguise, and Doof says in surprise, "Dr. Wexler, you're a platypus." But then Perry puts on the fedora and Doof then exclaims, "Perry the platypus!" That's pretty much my favorite bit in the episode.
That's funny. I don't remember you saying spec so many times. Dr. Wexler, you're a platypus. Perry the platypus! I want to say that I knew it was you all along, but I can't because I didn't.
And then there's the scenes of the two fighting with their robots. I had a good chuckle when Doof and Perry got in the robots the first time, and Doof says, "Your giant robot dragon is no match for my giant robot Queen Elizabeth I." And then they switch robots because the joke is that both Perry and Queen Elizabeth I are mainly associated with good, and Dr. Doofenshmirtz and the dragon are mainly associated with evil. But then there's the part I really laughed at the most in this entire fight. After Perry in the Queen Elizabeth I robot starts fighting Doof in the dragon robot with its laser eyes, Doof tries to fight back and says, "Well, yours may have laser eyes, but mine breathes fire," and on the second he says the fire part, he starts to shoot fire, but because he's in the dragon's mouth where the control panel is, the fire goes directly onto Doof and he screams out in pain as he's getting burned, and as soon as we see him all covered in ash, he says, "That was a stupid design."
Well, yours may have laser eyes, but mine breathes fire! That was a stupid design.
And yeah, it is a pretty weird design. If the control panel was located in the dragon's eyes, maybe he wouldn't have been burned so easily, but that would sort of defeat the whole purpose of the joke. And the Black Knight song was pretty decent. Not the most memorable song in the show, but there were some funny lyrics such as how the Hounds of Heck chased after the knight because his armor was made from recycled dog food cans. Of course, that lyric was meant to be a joke because dog food cans didn't really exist in the medieval period.
The Hounds of Heck chased after him through all the moors and lands because his suit of armor was recycled dog food cans. The Black Knight of Worcestershire, some say it's Worcestershire, he rode off with his Hounds of Heck to face the dragon's fire.
And for some reason, Ferb's line at the end made me laugh where he says, "I heard there's a new version of Jane Eyre in the offing," mainly because it's a callback to earlier where Lawrence could have seen a robot fight happening, but he's just looking at the newspaper and he reads that there's going to be a new adaptation of Jane Eyre. Now, for the animation, this episode was animated by Rough Draft Korea, and what they did here was once again not that bad. Like, it may not be as fantastic as Synergy's work later on, but they still did a solid job, as the characters' movements have a strong hand-drawn feel to them, the backgrounds are solid, including the panning shot across the medieval field to the castle in the Black Knight song sequence, with a bit of shading and lighting. The visual gags are well executed, including the gravy truck and animal control truck colliding to recreate the Hounds of Heck chase. The effects are pretty good, like the smell effect of the gravy as the Black Knight Candace is being chased by the dogs, and the action scenes are enjoyable too, with the jousting scenes and the robot fight between Perry's Queen Elizabeth I robot and Doof's dragon robot. But among the errors I spotted, watching this episode and then Elementary My Dear Stacy, I found it really odd that in this episode, the London Eye and Big Ben are among with Buckingham Palace and the White Cliffs of Dover, but in Elementary My Dear Stacy, the London Eye and Big Ben are in their original places. I also found a goof when the evil con Booth Man gives Perry, as Dr. Lloyd Wexler, his evil button, and the button he hands Perry is off of his own shirt, and then after he hands it to Perry, another evil button appears on his shirt, as well as the addition of a blonde woman with glasses and a pink turtleneck who wasn't in the bleachers before, after the Black Knight Candace leaves the tournament. Another moment that seemed pretty weird is when the Black Knight Candace gets launched from the catapult and her flight path over the view stand is already slightly down as she leaves the scene, yet she is on a decidedly upward path when she flies into the tower window, as well as when Doofenshmirtz and Perry are walking in the evil con before Perry reads the autobiography. There are people and stands in the scene, but when the giant robot's room gets zoomed out, the people and stands are gone, and it's funny how the control booth of the dragon robot had positioned in the mouth, making the fire hit Dr. Doof, but the control booth of the Queen Elizabeth I robot had positioned behind the eyes, where the lasers get shot. Wouldn't Perry be affected by that too? Even then, animation errors can still be funny, even if some are worth a bit of criticism, and even at that, my criticisms here are only minor nitpicks. With all those things I've talked about, this was still another enjoyable and hilarious episode from the show, and one that's as worth seeing as a bold knight's shining armor. Okay, now for our next segment, I'm going to be getting into iBrobot. And iBrobot was a story by Martin Olson, storyboarded by Kent Osborne and Aliki Theophilopoulos, and it was directed by Dan Povenmire. This one starts off with the boys sitting under the tree in the backyard, going through the candidates for what awesome thing they will do today. Among the choices are a completely food-based water park, a tunnel to the center of the earth, a chamber of invisibility, and a microscopic zoo that rests on the head of a pin. As the realization sinks in that they have a lot of blueprints, models, and schematics, a falling leaf prompts Phineas to comment that,
"Hey Ferb, summer doesn't last forever and we've got too many plans for just the two of us. We either need more days of summer or more of us.
Ferb hands over his plans for a robot, and that gives Phineas an idea. Make Phinedroids and Ferbots, which are essentially robot versions of themselves. At this moment, Phineas notices Perry is missing. Perry is up on the roof of their house pressing bricks on the chimney, and the chimney opens up to reveal an elevator. During the trip down to his lair, it makes a stop and Santa Claus gets in, and then Perry gets off, revealing a sign that says Chimney Vader. Major Monogram begins the briefing, telling Agent P that Dr. Doofenshmirtz has made 57 phone calls in the past hour, but he doesn't know to whom or why. Agent P points back towards the elevator door, but Major Monogram says it's not to Santa. As Agent P leaves, Major Monogram tells Carl, who is off-screen, that this is why he doesn't like using the Chimney Vader, beside the fact that Santa owed him a pony. Back in the garage, the boys are finishing up with the robot building device. Phineas places pictures of them on the scanner, and within moments, the robots are done in the new version of the device. The one sitting in the background is deemed an old dinosaur. As pairs of the Phinedroids and Ferbots march out of the new device, Phineas starts to welcome them, and he notices that Ferb's bullhorn is not on, even though Ferb isn't saying anything. He continues and asks the robots to each take a blueprint and report to the backyard. Phineas asks Ferb to do the honors, which is to select dance mode on the remote control, and that's when the robots begin dancing and singing the song Phinedroids and Ferbots, and the boys join in, and soon everyone is bustin' chillin' moves with their robot poses like in the lyrics. Meanwhile, at Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, Dr. Doofenshmirtz is scrunched up in a red chair, muttering, "Why won't she pick up?" Agent P lets himself in the room using a key that Doof has given him, and Doof thanks him and then tries to persuade Agent P that he isn't up to anything, just dealing with a relationship bump with his new girlfriend. Agent P glances over to the computer where there's a plan for a crane-mounted magnet, which will help him erase the messages he's left on her answering machine. Agent P gives him a disapproving look, so Doof activates a net trap and says that Perry doesn't believe in love before he drives off in the crane.
I mean, I know there's an ordinance against it, but... What? Oh, come on, Perry the Platypus. Oh, well, too bad for you. Too bad you don't believe in love. Too bad!
Meanwhile, back at the house, Candace is on the phone with Stacy, saying she can't watch Stacy get her ears pierced because she is in charge while Linda is over at Zippy Pix. A Phinedroid walks by the window carrying a ladder. At first, Candace doesn't think this is unusual until a second Phinedroid walks by, carrying the back end of the same ladder. Candace ends her call and goes to the backyard and is confronted by the sight of multiple Phineases and Ferbs. She concludes that her brothers are robots, and it causes her to freak out, run through the house, and climb down the ladder into her panic room. Clutching Mr. Miggins, she calls her mom and tries to tell her about the Phinedroids and Ferbots, and Linda says she's heard all this before and tells Candace she'll see the robots after she gets home. Candace knows everything will be gone by that time, but as she talks to Mr. Miggins, she realizes that if she catches one, she'll have proof. After donning protective gear, she sets out a can of oil as bait. A Ferbot takes a drink, and Candace catches it in a burlap bag, and then Candace dumps the bag in front of the house, then calls Stacy to let her know what she's done, but she doesn't get very far because Stacy is crying. A few moments later, Stacy's mom comes on the phone, so Candace pretends she didn't know anything about the ear piercing. Behind her, a garbage truck has picked up the burlap bag, followed by a Fred's fertilizer truck dropping off a bag of fertilizer. Candace is thinking about poor mixed-up Stacy and doesn't notice the change. Back at Doof's lair, Agent P pulls a can of fancy cheese spray out of his hat. A mouse climbs down the rope and starts eating the cheese that Agent P sprayed on. Over in the backyard, Phineas and Ferb check on the robot's progress. The Chamber of Invisibility is completed. Phineas congratulates the Ferbot, then notes he'd normally tell Ferb that. And then there's the microscopic zoo, and Phineas climbs up the ladder and peers through the eyepiece of the giant microscope, also a success. As Phineas looks at the tunnel to the center of the Earth, he begins to realize that it isn't as fun when others do their projects for them. At this moment, a Phinedroid delivers a new plan to him, which is for the hovercraft lounge chair, which the Phinedroid has already completed and rides away on. This was the plan that the boys were going to do the following week, and Phineas sees that it's getting worse. The robots have run out of projects and are designing their own, to which Phineas asks, "Have we learned nothing from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein?" Then he notices the coffee stand. He pronounces the overpriced coffee stand as so 90s.
Oh no, the Phinedroids and Ferbots have run out of projects, so they're designing their own. Have we learned nothing from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein? Look, they've started their own overpriced coffee franchise. That's so 90s.
Just then, the coffee creates a new problem, that the robots start going haywire. One can't sleep. When one falls down in front of him, Phineas decides to shut down the coffee stand, but the Phinedroids and Ferbots don't like it. Phineas tries to execute the shutdown command, but it doesn't work, and the robots start closing in on the boys. In a different part of Danville, Doofenshmirtz is driving the crane towards his girlfriend's house, singing along with the radio to Gitchy Gitchy Goo, and he's almost there, looking forward to erasing the embarrassing messages and leaving new ones. Just then he sees Agent P in the road and stops the crane, and he realizes the mouse must have helped him escape his net. He warns Agent P to get out of the way or he'll drop the magnet on him, and Agent P refuses to budge. After a couple seconds, Doof releases the magnet, and just before the magnet lands on Agent P, Santa swoops by in his sleigh and catches the magnet on the sleigh's runners. Doof says that it doesn't make sense because it's the middle of July, but Santa replies that he's on a summer run. As Santa flies off, Doof says, "Bah humbug." In the backyard, things are looking grim as Phineas laments that their creations have turned on them and says,
"If only we had some sort of device that could stop them from..." I know, I'm just messing with you.
Ferb pulls out the remote control and Phineas says he was just messing with Ferb, and then Phineas presses the dance button, and the robots begin dancing again and singing the second part of the Phinedroids and Ferbots song, and Phineas and Ferb dance with them as well. Up on the sidewalk, Candace proclaims 80s music is so 2002. Linda arrives and wants to show Candace the photos, but Candace is in a hurry to show her what she caught. She dumps the bag in front of her mom and opens it. Linda peers in and says, "That's a very nice bag of manure, Candace." Candace looks at it and shrieks, causing Linda to drop the pictures. Suddenly, Candace hears some voices and runs to the backyard. The robots are still there, so she tries to get her mom to see them. Neither of them see Santa flying overhead. As he flies over the backyard, the magnet lifts the robots out of the yard, leaving behind Phineas and Ferb still dancing. As Candace drives Linda to the gate, unaware of the disappearance, she says that even though she's done this 19 other times, she's confident that there are robots, but when she opens the gate, all the robots are gone and only the real Phineas and Ferb, who are still robot dancing, are present. Linda sarcastically agrees that there are Phineas and Ferb robots in the backyard as Candace hangs her head in shame, and Phineas and Ferb are shown robot dancing for a final time, and that's the end of Brobot. Now let's go over the cultural references. Starting off, the title is an obvious parody of the Isaac Asimov novel I, Robot and its 2004 20th Century Fox film adaptation starring Will Smith. I've seen that movie before and I don't really know how to fully express my opinion right now since it's been a long time since I watched it, so I might need another rewatch to fully have some judgment toward it. I have the Blu-ray though. Another episode of an animated TV series to share that reference is the Simpsons episode I, Dobot, or as it's officially written, I Annoyed Gruntbot, from season 15, which aired months before the I, Robot movie came out. It's the one where Bart enters his new robot into the Robot Rumble TV show, unaware that it's actually Homer in a costume, and upon watching that one, I found it mostly alright. It does highlight Homer being a good father, among other positives. On the other hand, though, the Snowball cat scenes are a little morbid, and I'll just say that the name and design choice for Bart's quote-unquote robot is representative of a racist stereotype that didn't age very well. Continuing on with the references, the tunnel to the center of the Earth, I believe, would be a reference to Journey to the Center of the Earth, both the original 1864 novel by French novelist Jules Verne and its many adaptations like the 1959 film. I remember as a kid I watched the 1959 movie and I enjoyed it. Like, it is pretty silly, but it's got a lot of what makes a fun sci-fi adventure blockbuster. I haven't watched it in so long, and because it's from 20th Century Fox, I do believe it's on Disney Plus for me to rewatch it at some point. Next up, the music that plays as the leaf drops in the beginning when Phineas realizes summer doesn't last forever is an arrangement of Morning Mood by Edvard Grieg, which is also heard later on in Bolorama Drama and in the Phineas and Ferb effect from Milo Murphy's Law. The entrance to the Chimney Vader, in which you have to tap a certain number of bricks or stones, is similar to the entrance to Dragon Alley in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's or Sorcerer's Stone, depending on where you are. Now, when it comes to the Harry Potter franchise, my sister and I have had an interesting relationship with it. I know we used to watch the movies, and my sister even read the original books and dressed up as Hermione for several Halloweens in the past, but when it comes to the creator and author J.K. Rowling, she is just a straight-up detestable human being with her anti-trans views. And normally I would be willing to separate the art from the artist, where I enjoy a certain piece of fiction, but dislike the person who made that piece of fiction. For example, I enjoy stuff like The Fairly Odd Parents and Danny Phantom, but the creator, Butch Hartman, is a narcissistic and ableist piece of crap. I also enjoy Solar Opposites and a bit of the earlier seasons of Rick and Morty, but the co-creator Justin Roiland is a scumbag who allegedly did some harmful activity in his personal life. But there are some cases where the artist behind the art is just way too problematic for me to separate the two, and J.K. Rowling is a perfect example with her works, including Harry Potter, since she's willing to use the money she gets from Harry Potter in order to help fund the erasure of trans people across the world, including that new HBO series, which is just evil. Since then, my sister and I have been looking for much better alternatives done by actually good people. In my case, it's with stuff like The Owl House, which is a Disney animated series created by Dana Terrace about a teenage human girl named Luz entering another world and becoming a good witch with help from her mentor Ida. It may have only run for 3 seasons with 43 episodes, and it does have similar elements to Harry Potter, but it does those way better and has great story structure across each episode, plus actual LGBTQ+ representation. I've mentioned that show several times on this podcast before, having reviewed some episodes of Chibiverse on this podcast, and I even watched the show itself all the way through a while back the first time, and it's really good. Seriously, if you haven't seen The Owl House, go watch it. It's on Disney Plus right now. And as for the new Harry Potter series, just stay as far away from it as possible. I didn't even watch the trailer for that, and that's how much I'm willing to just avoid it like the plague. Because, as always, trans rights are human rights. Sorry for going on about this for so long, but screw Rowling and screw the whole franchise now, honestly. End of story. Anyways, the next cultural reference I found is that when Phineas says to Ferb, "Have we learned nothing from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein?" he directly references the 1818 novel Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus by English author Mary Shelley. I haven't read that book, but I have seen the movie Young Frankenstein by Mel Brooks, and it was a fun parody of the classic horror genre, including the other film adaptations of the original book. Still a good reference though. A reference I didn't know before until I found out now is that the name of the Brobot's coffee franchise, Robots Bean and Tea Leaf, is a parody of the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, an existing coffee chain based in California. When Santa takes the giant magnet, Doof says "Bah humbug," just like Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, one of the most recognizable Christmas stories out there, whether it's the original Charles Dickens novel or the several film adaptations, one of my favorites being the Muppets version from 1992. Also, according to the Phineas and Ferb wiki, Doofenshmirtz claims to have left 57 messages to his new girlfriend, and this could be in reference to the fact that he shares his first name, Heinz, with an American food processing company known for having 57 different products. And lastly, when Candace says 80s music is so 2002, I found out that she could be referring to the video game Grand Theft Auto Vice City, as it is set in the 1980s, specifically set in 1986, and its soundtrack is entirely a compilation of 80s music, which was also introduced to a younger generation of both gamers and music lovers when it came out in 2002 on the PlayStation 2. Ironically, Candace's voice actress Ashley Tisdale did 5 covers of 80s songs in 2008, including Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. Imagine getting rickrolled by Candace at that time. Back onto GTA, I haven't played Vice City yet, even though I have the game on my PS2, but that doesn't mean I haven't played any Grand Theft Auto games. I've actually played San Andreas, which was the first game that I got for the PS2 after I found a PS2 in a thrift store a few years back, and it is a lot of fun. And now for some more handy tools out of my big toolbox of Brobot supplies, and there are a lot of handy tools for this one. This episode shows that Santa Claus is part of the Phineas and Ferb universe. In this episode, Santa was voiced by Dan Povenmire, but later on, in the Season 2 episode, Phineas and Ferb Christmas Vacation, he's voiced by Clancy Brown. And Perry is shown to like Santa in this episode.
Ho, 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 I'm on a summer run! Farewell, Barry the Platypus! And pass up on enjoying this cool rest stop you made me? Ho, 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 unthinkable! And thanks for doing the Danville run for me.
You knew?
Of course I knew! I'm Santa Claus!
Agent P keeps the key to Dr. Doofenshmirtz's home inside a pocket in his fur, and this was given to him by Doof to cut back on damage to the building, which shows how their relationship came to grow throughout the course of the show, which, spoiler alert, is one of the things I liked about this episode. This episode contains the largest number of Phineas and Ferb's big ideas in an episode, where there were 8 in total. These include the main one, the Phinedroids and Ferbots, and then there's the second generation robot building device, the first generation robot building device, which must have been done prior to this episode but not shown in any of the previous episodes before it, the microscopic zoo, the chamber of invisibility, the tunnel to the center of the earth, the hovercraft lounge chair, and a completely food-based water park, which was mentioned but not built in this one. Candace doesn't say anything when she discovers that the Brobots disappeared, making this the first episode to show that kind of scenario. Previously, in Candace Loses Her Head, Dr. Doofenshmirtz developed a plan for a tunnel to China, which would have also gone through the center of the Earth. In this episode, the Phinedroids and Ferbots solved the problem of dealing with the molten lava at the Earth's core, and yet Doof didn't. This is the second time Ferb doesn't speak at all following the Fast and the Phineas. Candace tries to bust her brothers even though she doesn't interact with them in this episode. In the Disney Plus subtitles, Chimney Vader is changed to Chimulator during Monogram's speech, and Mrs. Hirano is misspelled as Mrs. Gerardo, Gerado, when Candace is calling Stacy. When Perry is in the Chimney Vader, the elevator music is Gitchy Gitchy Goo again.
Ho, 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 that elevator!
and of course, Doof sings along to the regular version of it while driving the crane.
Bow chicka bow wow. That's what my baby says. Meow meow. Oh, there it is. My new girlfriend's house.
When the robots run out of plants that the boys gave them and started creating their own, a Ferbot is seen designing a roller coaster in the same design that Ferb came up with in the first episode Roller Coaster. Speaking of which, Candace tells Linda, "I know I've done this 19 other times," when attempting to show her mother what the boys are doing, and since this is the 18th episode produced, that would make training monkeys to juggle bicycles the first plan Candace tried to bust her brothers for, which is mentioned in Roller Coaster. Candace said she tried busting 19 other times, which is a reference to the production order of the series, but she actually tried it 12 times on screen as there have only been 17 previous stories in the production order, and she doesn't try to bust her brothers in episodes like Lawn Gnome Beach Party of Terror, Like Candace Action, Get That Bigfoot Out of My Face, Tree to Get Ready, and A Hard Day's Night, though she could have been exaggerating. However, she did drag Linda around multiple times in some episodes, and the episodes are not in chronological order, as despite airing on later dates, Candace Loses Her Head takes place in July, Summer Belongs to You is in June, and the Season 3 episode When Worlds Collide is in late May, according to the Bust Accord, which implies that the episode takes place before the summer. And since it takes place on the same day as Giants, that episode is set in May too. My guess is that both of those episodes may have taken place the May before the original summer. Like, I don't know if it would be the May before the new summer that's in Season 5 onwards, considering that Doof was still trying to be good for the most part, but since he has had some relapses during that time, it could be that. I don't know, the chronological timeline of the Dwampyverse is pretty confusing to me sometimes. This is also the first time Candace gives the big idea, or part of it, its name, and she does that again later on in Lots of Latkes from Season 3. It's also the fourth time that Candace doesn't stutter upon finding out that the big idea disappeared following the Fast and the Phineas, Flop Stars, and Raging Bully. The first episode in broadcast order that Isabella isn't there, but in production order she previously wasn't in Are You My Mummy, Toy to the World, and the one I already went over today, A Hard Day's Night, and it's the first episode to show Candace having a panic room where she keeps her stuffed teddy bear Mr. Miggins. The other time she does so is Invasion of the Ferb Snatchers from Season 2. Alright, let's get into my thoughts on the episode now. I'd honestly put it close to par with A Hard Day's Night because this was also an enjoyable one. I would say it's hard for me to determine which side of the story is better because they're both equally pretty good in this one. The main plot with the brothers building robot versions of themselves to help out with their projects is solid and had memorable moments, such as the scenes where Candace runs and hides in the panic room, which even includes the end credit sequence, and the Phinedroids and Ferbots song, which was a bit more memorable than the Black Knight song from the previous segment with a catchy instrumental of techno synth beats, even if the lyrics are simple. And the subplot with Perry stopping Doofenshmirtz from erasing his unanswered messages from his girlfriend's answering machine with the giant magnet had some of the episode's funniest moments as well as the evolving relationship between the two. Also, when Phineas finds out that the Brobots ran out of projects designed by the boys themselves and decided to design their own, I wondered if they made the frightening prediction of AI taking over people's lives. In an age where corporations and governments have invested in robots and AI technology to try and replace humans for a certain job, this episode's climax kinda sparked that question for me. Like, even when the Phinedroids and Ferbots close in on their creators to destroy them after Phineas shut down the coffee shop, I felt like I would never look at that scene the same way again, but that was before they pressed the dance button so the robots could go back to their nicer selves. Also, before then, Phineas tries to shut the Brobots down saying, "Time to show these robots who's in charge," but it takes forever and the Brobots close in on the boys surrounding them, and he says to Ferb, "I think they're in charge." Another moment that made me chuckle.
Well, that's no good. Time to show these robots who's in charge. Ferb, I think they're in charge.
And the robot building computer is pretty creative with how you just scan a photo of yourself and build a robot version of yourself. But during Phineas's speech to the Brobots over the bullhorn, it was ironic for Phineas to say Ferb's bullhorn isn't on, even though Ferb doesn't speak much, but that joke was still pretty funny to me. And another one of my favorite bits of the main plot is when Phineas sees the Brobots starting up their overpriced coffee brand and says, "That's so 90s," which, not gonna lie, it kind of is, as it kind of reminds me of Central Perk from Friends, which came out in the 90s. On to the Perry subplot. The Chimney Vader is probably one of my favorite lair entrances by Perry, in which the bricks inside the chimney reveal an elevator entrance, and Doof putting his giant magnet over his girlfriend's house with a crane to erase all the messages he left is kind of a silly scheme, because the magnet is so big that not only will it be able to warp and erase the voice messages on the answering machine in a way that it corrupts it to the point that it doesn't work anymore, but it'll likely also cause other electronics to not work anymore. And I liked Perry's method of escape, where he sprays the rope on the net with cheese spray for the mouse to bite off. And then come some of my big highlights of the episode. First, after noticing that Perry isn't amused about Doof's scheme with the giant magnet, the latter traps Perry in the net and says in a hurt tone, "Too bad for you. Too bad you don't believe in love." And then he runs off, gets in the crane, and continues, "Too bad!" Then later on, after Doof tells Perry to get out of the way of the crane before he drops his giant magnet on him, and Perry refuses, Doof says, as a lazy tailor would say, "Shoot yourself," before releasing the magnet. Probably the funniest moment in the episode for me, including after Doof sees Santa flying over Danville during the middle of July, in which he replies, "Bah humbug."
Get out of the way, Perry the Platypus! Don't make me drop this giant magnet on you! Well then, as a lazy tailor would say, suit yourself! That doesn't make sense! It's the middle of July!
Ho, ho, ho! I'm on a summer run! Farewell, Perry the Platypus!
Bah humbug.
Rough Draft Korea once again provided the animation for this episode, and like the previous segment, it was pretty well done. Again, the movements have that paper-drawn yet fluid feel as usual, and I will say that the designs of the Brobots are quite creative, having light bulbs for eyes and screws or nuts for ears, with the Ferbots having faucets for a mouth and aluminum cans for a nose. There are some solid visual gags, such as the garbage man taking away the bag with the Ferbot inside, and a fertilizer guy replacing it with a bag of manure in the background during Candace's call. And I saw that the Santa in this episode looked pretty different from the one in Phineas and Ferb Christmas Vacation, in addition to being voiced by Dan in this episode, and the other one in Christmas Vacation being voiced by Mr. Krabs. If there are some things to critique though, and forgive me if some of these come off as nitpicks, but there is a lack of mouth movement in a couple shots when the characters are speaking. The first time is when Santa is speaking as he enters the elevator, and the second is during the credits when Linda is speaking as she walks into the backyard with the photos. Also, when Phineas is first seen typing commands into the computer, the connecting cord and the second-generation robot making machine are missing, and his mouth briefly doesn't move at all whilst he is talking earlier in this scene, but this only lasts for a short period of time. My guess is because the episode was produced in 16:9, but the original standard broadcast was cropped to 4:3 at the time, as well as on the Days of Summer DVD, in terms of the aspect ratio. And this one may be a minor nitpick too, But although the Phinedroids and Ferbots were removed by Santa Claus, it was never shown what happened to the remaining completed projects, therefore Linda should have seen them. I guess they were probably cleaned up in the background by some of the Brobots during the final dance sequence. That's just a theory I have. But yeah, I overall enjoyed this episode. The main plot and the subplot were both equally entertaining, and I look forward to watching it again. Now, our last thing to cover here is the credit sequences, and I can't believe I finally get to talk about these after having not done a Phineas and Ferb episode review in so long. So, during the end credits of the standalone airings of A Hard Day's Night, for some reason they recycled the Perry the Platypus end credits from the standalone airings of both Roller Coaster and Lawn Gnome Beach Party of Terror. I'm guessing because they didn't have a unique credit sequence planned out, or they didn't feel like repeating Ballad of the Black Knight. In my honest opinion, I think the standalone broadcast credit sequence should have been Sir Phineas and Ferb after hearing the now discovered lyrical version of the song, with a unique animation to go alongside it above the credits. At the same time, though, they are mostly airing the paired episodes in a full half hour nowadays, so I guess it makes sense why they would either repeat a song from the episode or reuse the Perry the Platypus credit sequence for these standalone 11-minute broadcasts of the first segment. But then we have Brobot, where it picks up where the episode left off as Linda is walking into the backyard a few minutes later, wanting to show off the pictures again, and a picture of Candace ends up flying out of her hands and into the garage, landing on the scanner. Then the robot building device makes a robot of her image, and Candace freaks out again when she sees a Candroid running in circles around her mom and the boys, and she runs back into the panic room. But the Candroid is already there, clutching Mr. Miggins, and Candace takes back Mr. Miggins from the Candroid before it cuts to the logos. And finally, we will end things off here with our roller coaster rating. I'm going to give A Hard Day's Night 8.5 Hounds of Heck roller coasters out of 10, and then for Brobot, I give it 8.5 roller coasters full of Phinedroids, Ferbots, and Candroids out of 10. So my overall rating for episode 10 amounts to 8.5 roller coasters out of 10. Both of these segments are very solid. The Ballad of the Black Knight was a fine song, but Phinedroids and Ferbots was more memorable, and some of their funniest moments come from Perry and Doof. Not perfect episodes, but still some episodes worth watching again. Alright, before we wrap things up for this episode, I've got some special news to go over.
Doofenshmirtz Evil News Update!
Over the months since my last episode, we've gotten more news related to the world of the Dwampyverse, including new merchandise like the announcement of the next wave of Phineas and Ferb Funko Pops, which include Candace, Dr. Doofenshmirtz, and Vanessa, and those are available for pre-order now. Dan Povenmire's discovery of Doof and Monogram live at the Tri-State Area Lounge, a music CD that was made for the crew during the first season and contains an original Doof and Monogram lounge skit that Dan cannot release for legal reasons. Phineas and Ferb appearing at a Savannah Bananas baseball game recently. The confirmation of a release date for Phineas and Ferb Season 6, where it will be premiering on Disney Channel and Disney Plus this fall, alongside Season 5 of Big City Greens, according to a source from Chorus Entertainment's press under the Disney Channel Canada highlights, and a new vertical short-form series called Locker Diaries Phineas and Ferb that I believe is set during the school year between the events of Season 4 and Season 5 of the main show. And right now, the first short has been released on June 6th, available on Disney Channel, Disney Plus, YouTube, and TikTok in time for the 1-year anniversary of when the show returned with Season 5. But I want to talk about the two biggest stories of this episode, and for the first of which, I can only sum it up with this audio over the following clip right here, if you're watching on YouTube. That's right, Phineas and Ferb is officially in Fortnite. Specifically, so far the first characters from Phineas and Ferb to be in Fortnite are Dr. Doofenshmirtz and a large muscular Perry the Platypus. And they have been on sale in the Fortnite marketplace from April 4th to April 14th, so if you didn't have a chance to get those skins during that period, you may be out of luck. I certainly didn't get to purchase those, I haven't played much Fortnite and I'm not very good at it, at least for the Battle Royale. But Disney has had success with including some of their franchises in Fortnite, including some of the 20th century IPs like The Simpsons, Futurama, King of the Hill, Family Guy, and Bob's Burgers, and also recently with Hercules and some of the Pixar franchises like Toy Story and The Incredibles. So it was inevitable that they were going to bring in Phineas and Ferb, especially now that the show is back and its 5th season has had great success on Disney+. And with these new additions, I'm hoping they continue to bring in more of these characters, including Phineas with the beak suit. That would be cool. If they do, then that'll hopefully get me even more interested in Fortnite if I get good at it, and then I could try and get those kinds of character skins. But yeah, congrats to Disney and Epic Games for yet another awesome collab. Hey guys, how you doing? This is Caleb from the future, and I just wanted to add one more thing before we move on. I just learned recently that Epic Games, the creators of Fortnite, had recently laid off thousands of their animators in favor of generative AI, including firing an employee who has terminal brain cancer and stripping away his life insurance. Oh my god, that is sickening. You know what? Screw Epic Games. I'm not even gonna bother with Fortnite or those Phineas and Ferb skins if more get added in the future. I'm just gonna play a different game instead. But yeah, that's basically all I wanted to let you guys know about. So now that you know about the situation with Epic Games and Fortnite, now we can get back to the episode. Let's continue. Now, for the second and possibly the biggest news story of the year, I barely expected this to happen. I was browsing my feed on Instagram just as Phineas and Ferb Season 5 ended earlier this year, and then suddenly, I saw a video from the official Phineas and Ferb Instagram account showing what looks like one of the key art pieces for the show, with Phineas and Ferb sitting under the tree, and Phineas had a thought bubble saying, "Today is going to be adequate," and Ferb, on the other hand, was disappearing, and in the caption it said, "What if Phineas and Ferb never met? A question I never want to consider, and a movie I can't wait to watch. Coming soon to Disney+. Yes, guys, we are officially getting a third Phineas and Ferb movie, and it's coming presumably in 2027 in honor of the show's 20th anniversary. Maybe later, but who knows. The first movie, Across the Second Dimension, was about Perry and the brothers' relationship with him, even after revealing himself to be a secret agent to them. The second one, Candace Against the Universe, was about Candace and her desire to feel more special in the universe after being abducted by aliens who turn out to not be the nice guys she thought they were. But for this one, they haven't titled it yet, but the plot summary comes from my source on Variety, in which it reads, Dr. Doofenshmirtz's latest time travel experiment backfires, erasing the moment Phineas's mom meets Ferb's dad, meaning the boys never become brothers and every day is merely adequate. As reality unravels and the future hangs in the balance, Phineas and Ferb must restore the timeline before it's too late. It also says that all of the main cast is confirmed to reprise their roles, including Vincent Martella as Phineas Flynn, David Arrigo Jr. as Ferb Fletcher, Ashley Tisdale as Candace Flynn, Caroline Ray as Linda Flynn Fletcher, Allison Stoner as Isabella Garcia Shapiro, Malik Pancholi as Baljit Jinder, Bobby Gaylor as Buford Van Stom, D. Bradley Baker as Perry the Platypus, Dan Povenmire as Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz, and Jeff Swampy Marsh as Major Francis Monogram. And joining the movie are writers Kate Condell and Jeff Howard, director Bob Bowen, who previously directed Candace Against the Universe, and producer Brandy Young. And the president of Disney-branded television, A.O. Davis, says, Phineas and Ferb is built on imagination, heart, and humor, where the unexpected is always part of the fun. This movie gives Dan and Swampy the chance to stretch that world even further and play with what happens when everything gets turned on its head. Povenmire and Marsh say in a joint statement, "We've always wanted to explore a story centered on family and unconditional love, preferably in a way that's bold and sentimental, yet classically funny. We're grateful to A.O. and her team for giving us the runway to expand Danville and take these characters to a whole new level." And that was back in January when this happened. In later news, in May 2026, a source from The Wrap confirmed that this movie will also be one of the animated projects to receive a tax credit from the California Film Commission alongside the second Simpsons movie, which will be coming out in 2027, as part of California's new incentive program for animated projects under the union. This means that if the movie or some portions of it are produced in California, they'll get a tax break for it, making it cheaper for the company to produce the movie in-house instead of relying on outsourcing to overseas studios, and the directors or showrunners will have quicker access to the work-in-progress animations for the movie, making correction of mistakes easier and allowing the people like Dan and Swampy to have an active role in the animation process from the beginning and not just at the end for corrections, as it seems to be the case with the show a lot of the time. So that's basically what there is to report, and hearing the premise, yeah, make no mistake, I'm absolutely on board with this. Like, this premise is actually pretty cool, and this movie has plenty of potential to be great, as we now get to look at a new timeline where Phineas and Ferb's parents never got together, and the boys themselves are not how they usually are as a result. And I'm positive that this is going to be a very heartwarming story that has family as the movie's centerpiece. And as much as I love the show, some of its highlights for me have always been the bigger stories, such as Summer Belongs to You, Night of the Living Pharmacist, and even stuff like Across the Second Dimension and Candace Against the Universe, and this one is really promising. But keep in mind that this is all that we know about this new Phineas and Ferb movie right now. The only stuff that I know as of right now is that it's going to be a time travel story showing what would happen if Phineas and Ferb's parents never met, a la Cinderella 3 A Twist in Time. All of the main cast is going to be reprising their roles. Bob Bowen is directing again among the other crew members that have been announced. It'll get a tax credit from the California Film Commission, and it's going to be coming on Disney Plus and Disney Channel sometime. Maybe in 2027 for the show's 20th anniversary, but it could come later though. On top of that, one promotional piece I saw on Instagram, which honestly feels mostly effortless. Like, all they did was take one of the promotional posters of Phineas and Ferb, give Phineas that extra stripe on his shirt like he now has in the revival run, and modify other elements such as closing Phineas's mouth and put a thought bubble on top saying today is gonna be adequate, and having Ferb fade in and out, and with no music or sound at all. Like, this promo is just so laughably bad. Even I could come up with a better way to promote this movie, for free by the way, than whatever this is. Of course, this particular segment of this podcast being a good example. and I will continue to give updates on the new movie as more reputable news sources come up over time. I mean, sure, I'm not too active with this podcast lately, considering that I've had other things going on in my life, but as long as the podcast is still going, I'll keep you in the loop whenever new stuff about the third movie comes flying in. But again, we will only know what's going to be in store for Phineas and Ferb the Movie 3 when it will be coming out on Disney Channel and Disney Plus, most likely in 2027 or later, depending on the state of things with both that and Season 6 of the show. And that is all that I've got for now, so thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Danville Discussion. As for me, you can find me on my Facebook page at Real Caleb Dirksen, on my Tumblr and TikTok pages at Caleb Dirksen2 with the number 2 at the end and all in lowercase, on Instagram at Caleb.Dirksen for my main page or at Caleb Flynn Fletcher for my alternate page, on Threads at Caleb.Dirksen, on DeviantArt at CalebDirksen20, and on BlueSky at CalebDirksen2.bsky.social. You can also add me on Discord by entering the username Caleb Reviews, all in one word and all in lowercase. You can also find me on YouTube, just search for Caleb Dirksen and look for the icon of me as a soldier. And if you want to give the most support for this podcast and get some great rewards, including getting access to new episodes 1 to 2 days early, then please consider joining me at patreon.com/Caleb Dirksen. Special thanks to all my followers or supporters on Patreon, including Kalela Shaw, Sue Friend, Brock Clifton Friend, Pandal, and my free patrons Gilbert Gann, Alec the Videomaker, Juan Almendarez, Ronnie Whitfield, Matheson Mullen, Susan Thagard, Nicholas Cangeli, Incarni Dominguez, and Fran Garcia. It really means a lot to me. As for this podcast, we are available to listen on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and you can also find us on Spotify for Creators by using your Apple or Android device or going on the web at anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen, and it'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion page on Spotify for Creators. And if you have liked what you've been listening to and you'd like to help us get discovered, then go out there and please hit that subscribe button on the podcast page. Please rate and review this show with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast service, and please tell your friends about it. And if you are watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube Music, then press that like button and leave us a little comment with your thoughts on this episode of Phineas and Ferb, as well as your thoughts on the announcements and news on the third movie. You can also share your feedback or ask some questions any other way, including sending us an email at danvillediscussion@gmail.com with either the Danville Discussion or the episode topic in the subject line. Join us next time, and I'm going to get back into Hamster and Gretel to talk about Episode 12 with Friday Night Fright and the Earworm. Tune in next time for the newest episode of the Danville Discussion with all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. And with that said, thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, this is Caleb, over and out. This podcast was created strictly and only for entertainment and information purposes. It is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company, Disney Television Animation, or their affiliates. All and any names, images, clips, sounds, or other items related to Phineas and Ferb, Milo Murphy's Law, Hamster and Gretel, and other Disney properties are trademarks and or copyrights of their respective holders. All original content from this podcast is the intellectual property of the Danville Discussion and the host or hosts running the podcast unless otherwise noted.
It's a Phinedroid! Oh, give me that.